We begin this hour with the Venezuelan crisis. Today, 12 European countries have now recognized Juan Guaido as that country's interim president. It comes 2 weeks after Guaido declared himself the new leader of the embattled nation. Despite all that, Italy is refusing to back an EU statement which recognizes Guaido. Meanwhile, President Trump has refused to speak and negotiate with Nicolas Maduro and is considering all options.
What would make you use the U.S. military in Venezuela? What's the national security
Well, I don't want to say
interest?
that, but certainly it's something that's on the, it's an option.
Joining us now to discuss the latest out of Venezuela, I'm joined by Dan Kovalik. He's a professor of international human rights at the University of Pittsburgh and author of The Plot to Control the World, How the U.S. Spent Billions to Change the Outcome of Elections Around the World. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, you just got back from Latin America. What is the feeling there with regard to these moves by the U.S. to support Juan Guaido and threaten Venezuela with military intervention?
Yes, well, specifically, I was in Nicaragua, and there's a lot of fear there that Nicaragua could be next if the Maduro regime is taken out by Donald Trump. I think there's a lot of trepidation throughout Latin America that the U.S. is taking a much more aggressive stance than it has in recent years against Latin America.
Dan, in the U.S. media, we mostly hear the crisis in Venezuela blamed on socialism or Maduro, but former UN official Alfred de Zayas has criticized the U.S. for engaging in economic warfare against Venezuela, which he said is killing Venezuelans. Where do you think the blame lies?
Yes, well, I agree with Mr. de Zayas on this issue. We have to remember that back in 2014, the U.S., number one, with Saudi Arabia, began to artificially depress oil prices, which, as the Independent of London pointed out, devastated the Venezuelan economy. The U.S. around that time also began sanctioning Venezuela, and those sanctions have only increased over time, making it impossible for Venezuela to restructure its debt, making it difficult and sometimes impossible for Venezuela to purchase medicine and food on the open market. And so I think we have to blame the United States for the lion's share of Venezuela's economic woes. And in fact, the U.S. has intentionally targeted Venezuela's economy in hopes of making it collapse and making the government collapse with it.
I want to turn your attention now to Italy. Italy has vetoed the EU Parliament's decision to recognize Guaido. How much of the EU support for Guaido, in your view, has to do with Venezuela's large oil reserves?
I think all of this has everything to do with Venezuela's oil reserves. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves on the planet. John Bolton, the national security advisor, has been very open that he wants American companies to have a large interest in Venezuela's oil reserves, and Europe also covets those reserves. It reminds me of when Noam Chomsky talked about Iraq and the run-up to the war there. He said we would not be at war with Iraq if their main export were cabbage, and the same theory applies to Venezuela.
Russia, China, and many other countries, they line up to support lawfully elected President Maduro, and the U.S. and its European allies have chosen to support his opposition. Are you concerned at all, Dan, about the danger of a major global conflict developing and escalating?
Yes, I think that such a global conflict certainly could be in the offing, either around Venezuela or around Ukraine or around Syria. We see all these hot spots where the major powers have interests and where there is a possibility of them colliding. I have great concern, and you mentioned at the top of the hour that the U.S. and now Russia has backed out of this intermediate-range nuclear missile deal that goes back to 1987. We see increasing tension between the main powers, and I think we should be very concerned of some sort of possible military conflict.
Dan, thank you so much for your insight. I guess we're just going to have to wait and see what happens here. Thank you.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.